Thank you, Professor Dato, Dr. Rashila, for your very informative presentation on various points on regional issues, as well as pillars of US foreign policy, such as multilateral versus unilateral approaches. We will hopefully get back to these issues with more details, with some questions after we heard the third presentation as well. Our third panelist is Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. He has a PhD in social sciences from the National University of Singapore. He is currently the president of the International Movement for a Just World, JUST, a Malaysian-based international NGO that critiques global injustice and seeks to develop an alternative vision of a just and compassionate civilization guided by universal spiritual and moral values. Dr. Muzaffar has published extensively on civilizational dialogue, international politics, religion, human rights, and Malaysian society. Among his latest publications are A World in Crisis, Is There a Cure? From 2014, and Reflections on Malaysian Unity and Other Challenges from 2017. In 1977, he founded Al-Iran, a multi-ethnic social reform group, which he led for 14 years. Apart from his role in JUST, Dr. Muzaffar, Chandra Muzaffar, sits on the board of a number of international NGOs as well, concerned with social justice and civilizational dialogue. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar was a professor and director of the Center for Civilizational Dialogue at the University of Malaya from 1997 to 1999, and professor of global studies at University of Science Malaysia 2007-2012. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar is also the recipient of a number of international awards related to his scholarship and social activism. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emir. Fellow panelists, Dr. Farooq, friends, peace be with you. Let me begin by thanking the Islamic Renaissance Front for this kind invitation. In my presentation, I shall address the two related issues in our webinar. One, will there be any changes in US foreign policy? And two, if there are not going to be any major changes, what will be the shape, what will be the color of US foreign policy in the coming years? The first question, will there be any changes? A new leadership which has emerged from a divided society. The United States is at one of its most divisive junctures in its history. So you can expect some changes in style. You can expect some changes perhaps that go beyond style. There will be less of the type of sometimes aggressive, sometimes unpredictable rhetoric associated with Donald Trump. There would be perhaps a measure of certainty in the way in which things are done. And in certain other areas, perhaps a change of sorts. The US, it appears to me, will perhaps return to some of the multilateral agreements. This is something which many people have predicted. The Paris Agreement is one example. And perhaps even certain other areas, they may want to return to this notion of working together with others. But we have to be a bit cautious about this. When the Biden leadership says they want to work together with others, they made it very clear. Yes, working together, multilateral, but we are going to be at the head of the table. We are going to take charge. We are going to lead. They made it very, very clear. In other words, we want to continue to dominate. We want to continue to, in some instances, dictate to the rest of the world. And that brings me to the second part of what I wanted to discuss. A US leadership that dominates and dictates will still be there. It's not going to change. It will not be a sort of a multilateralism that has a new tone and tenor. No. It will be what we have seen before. And all US presidents for a very long while. Work with others when it suits our interests. Work with others if it allows us to dominate and to control everyone else. Work with others in terms of our own interests. We'll pursue that. And those who don't toe the line, they'll have to pay the price. That has been US foreign policy. That's not going to change. So let's not be naive about how things will happen. You just have to look at something which is quite straightforward. Look at the appointments of the individuals in his new cabinet, in Biden's cabinet, and other key individuals. You can see from this that the man who has been in power for a long while, who is very much part of the system, someone who is favored by the deep state, very much a creature of the deep state, is going to pursue the policies which have been the agenda of the deep state. There may be some differences here and there, but basically that would be the approach. To be more concrete about this, I do not think under Biden you're going to see the US reduce its defense expenditure. That's not going to happen. Its military spending, which are very critical dimensions of power, that's going to remain. The US is going to continue to maintain its bases around the globe, 800 physical bases, drone bases, the whole lot. They'll perpetuate their power, their hard power, the military power. That's going to remain unchanged. I don't see the US working towards a more equitable political order, which is related to the security order. In other words, they're not going to democratize the UN Security Council, give a greater say to smaller nations, ensure that decision-making is more genuinely democratic. I don't think that's going to happen at all. They'll maintain the existing structure of power in terms of global politics because it serves their interests. And as far as the global economy is concerned, they will do all they can to sustain and to perpetuate the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, because that's critical to US power. They'll ensure that the global institutions that ensure US dominance in the global economy will remain intact, by which I mean your WTO, World Bank, IMF, that's not going to change. And even when they try to forge some type of international cooperation, it'll be a la TPP, which, as many of us know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was basically an attempt to perpetuate US power. And in the end, of course, it didn't work. So that's as far as the global economy is concerned. If you look at the global information system with the new channels of communication, the US is going to do everything it can to ensure that its dominant position remains within this new terrain, just as it was dominant within the old terrain, as far as information communication is concerned. And culture, entertainment, very important dimensions of global power and control, they'll remain in control. They'll ensure that they're still dominant. So friends, let's be very realistic. The Biden-Kamala Harris leadership is not going to usher in a new world. It's not going to make things happier for those of us who are victims of this global order. We may not have to deal with the unpredictability of the Trump regime. We may not have to deal with some of its uglier dimensions, yes, but nonetheless, dominance and control, in some instances, more subtle, cleverer. That's going to be the order of the day. You just have to look at the different regions. Do you think US relationship with Latin America is going to change? Perhaps in terms of style, some changes. Maybe it'd be more of what Obama tried to do vis-a-vis Cuba, rather than what had been done all along vis-a-vis Cuba. Things may change a little bit. But Venezuela, the sanctions will remain. If you look at the other states that they're not happy with, Bolivia, a number of other states, they're going to continue to bully them. That's not going to change. We have to be very realistic. Africa, do you think things will change? The US's approach to sub-Saharan Africa, basically dictated by security, the desire to exercise political and security power as far as Africa is concerned, and to ensure that China is kept at bay. They'll try to curb and control China. That's going to remain. Eurasia, very important area as far as world politics is concerned. Will there be any changes? I don't think so. The US will continue to pursue the policies that they've pursued all along in terms of dominance and control. And in that sphere, Russia. The rhetoric may change a little bit, but I think dominance and control will be very, very important, especially since Biden will be dealing with Russia, and he has dealt with Russia before. He'll be dealing with a Russia which is militarily much more sophisticated than it was when he was vice president under Barack Obama. He knows that. So the focus is going to be sharper as far as Russia is concerned. South Asia, India, Pakistan, there are Pakistani analysts who said, oh, it's going to be better for Pakistan and so on. I don't think so. In fact, I predict that the US under James Biden, under Joe Biden, is going to lean more towards India, partly because of the domestic lobby, which is quite strong. And if you look at even the individuals who've been appointed to various roles, you can see who these individuals are. There'll be a greater tendency to sort of play footsie with India. And Pakistan will continue to be kept aside. China, again, China will be in the crosshairs of the US. There may be some changes compared to the Trump period in terms of both the rhetoric and certain aspects of policy, but China, the fear is real as far as the US and the centers of power in the West are concerned. It is this fear of that one nation, which in the last 250 years has emerged that is capable of challenging, and they know it, in the United States and in the West, of challenging and defeating the West. And that's China. They know that. Why do I say that? Because of China's economic power, which is immense. One. Number two, because of China's scientific progress, which is the essence of power, scientific progress. China has achieved more in science and technology than any other rival of the United States in history. And they know that. And three, because of China's diplomatic sophistication. Why do I say that? The One Belt, One Road initiative is very, very sophisticated. It is an attempt to play a dominant role without the bloodshed and the conquest associated with military power. And the Chinese have planned it out quite carefully. So I think the US knows they're going to focus on China. Russia for different reasons, but in terms of wanting to control the world, it's going to remain. And that brings me to a couple of points that I want to make before I close. Why would the US want to continue to do this? Remain hegemonic, dominant, powerful, wanting to control? Because it is in the very DNA of great powers in history. That's what they do. And the US has exercised power in a much more blatant way than any other great power in recent centuries. And they want to continue to exercise that power. We would be misleading ourselves, deceiving ourselves with thinking that somehow the US is going to be different, that it's going to give up its throne. It will not. It received its throne in terms of global dominance in a very unique way. It is one of the very few instances in history where a reigning global power, a global power that exercised a lot of influence, gave way happily, in some respects, to yet another power, Britain to the United States. And at that point, in 1945, the United States had total control over every dimension of global power: economic, scientific, political, security, information, cultural, everything. Of course, in the course of the decades, they were challenged by both the Soviet Union and some of the other communist states, but also by the nationalist forces that emerged, the third world that was emerging. So they never really exercised the type of power they wanted. And they thought one brief moment that they would, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the decline of nationalist movements. But that didn't happen either, because all sorts of new forces, new permutations and constellations emerged, and they found that they were not able to dominate. This is what prompted Samuel Huntington to sort of postulate a certain theory of what the world would look like, thinking that the US, people like Huntington, Francis Fukuyama, they thought that this was going to be the new order, but it has not worked. Now, the US knows that there are other challenges. It's going to be very difficult for them to dominate, but the desire to dominate will be even greater. Some of us have said that a global superpower is a menace to humanity, not because it is at the apex. It is when it is declining that is a greater menace. It's like a wounded tiger. It can't take it. And so you can see a situation where this is what I think will unfold before our eyes, where the US will do all it can to sustain and perpetuate its power. But there'll be all sorts of challenges. Those things have changed. And this is why, if there's any message people like us, citizens in the global South, would want to convey to the US, learn how to adjust to the world that has changed. Recognize and respect others. the roles they want to play, the roles they are capable of playing. Look at the changes that have taken place in almost every area. Come to terms with that. And you'd be doing a great favor to your own people if you can do that, rather than wanting to perpetuate your dominance. If that message was conveyed to the US people, and not just to Donald Trump, because he is at the helm, was at the helm when some of these critical changes were happening. To everyone in the US, including people like Biden, this is the message. And that message came from a little virus. You're not very powerful. You can't even look after your own people in a crisis. 280,000 have died. The economy is in total shambles. Your situation is a mess. You cannot even separate the interests of the people from the interests of the powerful pharmaceutical firms when it comes to providing your own people with vaccines. That's your situation. And I was appalled. I was shocked to read just yesterday that US billionaires, 651 US billionaires, they'd accumulated more wealth during the pandemic than before the pandemic. In a situation where your own people, they have to depend upon soup kitchens and they can't even put food on the table. You've got your billionaires, 651 of them, increasing their wealth by $1 trillion US. It increased their wealth in this period. This is your system. It's your economic system. The type of ideology you have pursued and tried to export to the rest of the world. And people have suffered as a result of that. And these are the consequences. And a little virus has told you the truth, but you're still not listening. You're still not paying heed. And I think Joe Biden is not going to be any different, which is why we must continue, all of us, academics, activists, citizens, all of us, we must continue to speak truth to power. Thank you very much.